Real reason why Paul Heyman betrayed Roman Reigns and sides with Seth Rollins. It was the moment no one saw coming, Paul Heyman, the Wiseman, turning his back on Roman Reigns. But this betrayal ran deeper than anyone imagined. Behind the cameras, behind the bloodline, lies a truth fueled by resentment, redemption, and revenge. Why did Heyman choose Seth Rollins? What shattered his loyalty to the tribal chief? This is the untold story of strategy, survival, and a dangerous new alliance that could shake WWE to its core. He would never betray Roman Reigns. Not Paul Heyman. Not the Wiseman. That was the lie millions of fans told themselves, right up until the night he did. It wasn't a steel chair to the back. It wasn't a surprise superkick. It was worse. It was silence. The kind of silence that follows a cold, deliberate decision made behind closed doors. In a business built on noise, Paul Heyman's betrayal was quiet, and that's what made it loud. The night it happened, the WWE Universe froze. Roman Reigns, flanked by the bloodline, had just commanded the ring as he always did, with power, presence, and complete control. Then came Heyman. His face gave nothing away. His voice trembled, not with fear, but with finality. And with one simple act, he turned his back on the tribal chief and walked toward a man few expected, Seth Rollins. No one. Not Reigns, not the fans, not even Rollins, saw it coming. But maybe we should have. This story isn't just about betrayal. It's about erosion. It's about what happens when power corrodes loyalty, when ambition warps respect, and when strategy overtakes emotion. This wasn't a heel turn. It was a strategic realignment, a calculated pivot by a man who's made his entire career out of betting on the right horse at the right time. But why Seth Rollins? That's the real question. Why not Cody Rhodes, Drew McIntyre, or even a returning Brock Lesnar? Why the man who burned down the Shield, embraced chaos, and has made a career out of bending, then breaking, every code of loyalty in WWE? Because Paul Heyman doesn't choose based on heart. He chooses based on heat. And in that heat, we find the answer. Let's get one thing straight, this isn't just a wrestling storyline. This is chess. Political, psychological, and deeply personal. To understand the betrayal, you have to understand the players. Paul Heyman isn't a manager, he's an operator. A manipulator. A man who survived ECW, navigated the Lesnar era, and wormed his way into the inner circle of the most dominant faction WWE has seen in the last decade. He's seen kingdoms rise and fall, and more importantly, he's known when to leave them before they burn. Roman Reigns? He wasn't just a client. He was the golden child. The tribal chief. The face of a dynasty. And the man who gave Heyman more TV time, more creative input, and more control than he'd had in years. For Heyman, the bloodline wasn't just a faction, it was a throne room. So again, why walk away from the throne? Because maybe the king stopped listening. Maybe the crown got too heavy. Maybe Heyman saw the end before it arrived and chose survival over loyalty. In this story, Heyman is the lens through which we see the truth. The bloodline wasn't cracked from the outside. It decayed from within. As we peel this story back, you'll see that the betrayal was seeded long before that infamous night. In subtle glances. In clipped promos. In storylines that seemed disconnected, until now. What seemed like coincidence was orchestration. What looked like loyalty was leverage. This isn't about what Paul Heyman did. It's about why he did it. And why, when given every option in the world, he sided with the one man who understands chaos as well as he does, Seth Rollins. So if you're expecting a clean answer, you won't find it here. What you'll find is something deeper. Something messier. A story of pride, resentment, strategy, and maybe revenge. Because sometimes, the loudest betrayal doesn't come with a scream. It comes with a smile. Acknowledge me. That phrase became gospel. And Roman Reigns wasn't just asking, he was demanding. What started as a return at SummerSlam 2020 evolved into one of the most dominant, psychologically layered title runs in modern wrestling. But behind the titles, the spears, and the stare-downs stood one man, Paul Heyman. He didn't need to say much. He didn't even need to move. Just standing next to Roman Reigns gave the entire operation a cold, calculating legitimacy. The kind you only get when power meets intelligence. Roman brought the presence. Heyman brought the plan. And the plan? Control everything. When Roman Reigns returned to WWE after a hiatus during the pandemic, fans expected a familiar face. But the man who returned wasn't a hero. He wasn't the underdog from the Shield days. He wasn't the corporate golden boy. He was colder. More methodical. Sharper. The audience didn't know it yet, but this Roman wasn't here to play by anyone's rules. Within days, Paul Heyman re-emerged at his side. This wasn't just shocking, it was symbolic. For years, Heyman had been synonymous with Brock Lesnar. Their alliance was legendary. Dominant. Violent. So when Heyman showed up flanking Roman, it sent a very clear message: Roman was now the apex predator, and he was building an empire. The tribal branding, the black glove, the slow, quiet promos, it was all part of a complete reinvention. No more pandering. No more forced babyface angles. This was a man claiming territory. Heyman didn't just ride shotgun. He became the voice of the revolution. And unlike his fast-talking style with Brock, his approach with Roman was more restrained. Intentional. Whispered, not shouted. Every word was weighted. Every sentence was surgical. The next evolution came with the addition of family. Jey Uso was the first to fall in line, but not without resistance. Their feud was brutal and emotional, culminating in a Hell in a Cell match that felt more like a therapy session than a title defense. Roman didn't just want to win. He wanted acknowledgement. And when Jey finally bowed, the audience realized something: this wasn't just about dominance in the ring. This was about dominance in the family. Reigns wasn't just a champion, he was building a legacy. Enter Jimmy Uso. Enter Solo Sikoa. Over time, the bloodline grew, and with it, their stranglehold on WWE. The story became deeper than wins and losses. It became about heritage. Loyalty. Pressure. And at the center of it, always, was Paul Heyman, the man who didn't share the family name but carried the family's secrets. If Roman Reigns was the warlord, Heyman was the war room. His presence added gravitas. His promos carried weight. He knew when to speak and, more importantly, when not to. In an era of overexposed storylines and bloated segments, Heyman's silence was a weapon. Every nod, every shift in his eyes, every moment of hesitation, it all told a story. Fans began analyzing his body language the way others study chess moves. And through it all, he stayed loyal. Or so it seemed. Heyman managed Roman's title defenses. He handled interviews, planted seeds in rivalries, and carefully crafted narratives. He wasn't just Roman's advocate. He was his handler. His cleaner. His consigliere. At least, that's what we thought. From 2020 to 2023, WWE revolved around the bloodline. Ratings spiked. Segments trended. Merchandise sold out. Roman became the head of the table, and Heyman was the man polishing the silverware. Every title match felt like a cinematic event. Every feud, whether with Edge, Daniel Bryan, Kevin Owens, or Sami Zayn, was elevated by the presence of the Wiseman. Behind the curtain, insiders reported that Heyman wasn't just a character, he was influencing creative. He was helping shape Roman's promos, suggesting angles, protecting the bloodline narrative from lazy booking. The partnership looked airtight. Mutually beneficial. Almost sacred. So what changed? The truth is, power always invites paranoia. And with every title defense, every close call, Roman tightened his grip. By 2023, the dynamic had shifted. Roman no longer needed Heyman the way he did in 2020. His mic skills had improved. His presence was fully developed. Heyman became less of a mentor and more of an accessory. And if there's one thing Paul Heyman doesn't tolerate, it's irrelevance. Small moments began to show the shift. Roman cutting Heyman off mid-promo. Solo Sikoa giving Heyman orders instead of the other way around. Even Jay and Jimmy started taking jabs. The family was growing stronger, but the Wiseman was being squeezed out. Maybe Heyman felt it. Maybe he saw the writing on the wall. Or maybe he realized something worse: he had created a monster he could no longer control. One of the biggest lies in wrestling is loyalty. On screen or backstage, loyalty lasts only as long as you're useful. The second you're not, you're out. Heyman knows this better than anyone. He's watched it happen in ECW. He lived it with Brock. He's been on both sides of that blade. So when Roman Reigns stopped needing him, Paul Heyman did what he always does: he looked for the next move. That move, as it turns out, was Seth Rollins. Not just because Seth had momentum. Not just because he was over with the fans. But because Seth was chaos. And Heyman knows how to weaponize chaos. But before we get to that partnership, you need to understand this: the rise of Roman Reigns wasn't just about domination. It was about dependency. And when that dependency disappeared, so did Paul Heyman's loyalty. In this business, you don't just manage stars. You build kingdoms, then leave before they collapse. Paul Heyman, uncensored backstage quote, 2019. You can't write the history of wrestling without Paul Heyman. You can't even write the present without him. From the blood-soaked bingo halls of ECW to the global stage of WrestleMania, Heyman has always been more than a mouthpiece. He's a visionary. A disruptor. A man who doesn't just adapt to the game, he reinvents it. And that's the problem. Most people see him as just a manager. They forget he's been booking main events since he was 21. That he took a dying promotion and made it a cultural rebellion. That he crafted careers out of chaos. That his fingerprints are all over the modern WWE, whether he's on screen or not. If you think Paul Heyman betrayed Roman Reigns because of ego or emotion, you don't know Paul Heyman. This wasn't about heart. It was about philosophy. Paul Heyman doesn't believe in loyalty. He believes in leverage. Every alliance he's ever made, from Brock Lesnar to CM Punk to Roman Reigns, has been strategic. Calculated. Ruthless. He doesn't ride coattails. He helps you build the coat, wear it, and then tears it off your back when you forget who stitched it. He sees wrestling as a chessboard, not a family. Where others see allies, he sees assets. Where others talk about legacy, Heyman calculates risk. He doesn't attach himself to superstars, he attaches himself to moments. To momentum. To opportunity. That's why when he joined Roman Reigns, it wasn't sentiment. It was timing. And when he left him, it wasn't betrayal. It was inevitability. To understand Heyman, go back to the 90s. He was the anarchist behind ECW, a gritty, rebellious, often bankrupt promotion that changed the tone of American wrestling forever. Blood, barbed wire, and authenticity. ECW wasn't polished, but it was real. It felt dangerous. Alive. And Heyman was the madman behind it all. But even then, he was strategic. He knew when to push the violence. When to pull back. When to hype a talent, and when to cut them loose. He played promoters, cable executives, even locker rooms like instruments. Every handshake had a motive. When ECW finally collapsed, he didn't go down with it. He jumped. Right into WWE. Right into commentary. Right into creative. And that's the lesson: Heyman doesn't die with his empires. He buries them. Then builds new ones. Heyman's most iconic modern partnership was with Brock Lesnar. A monster with limited mic skills and unlimited destruction. Their dynamic was simple: Lesnar broke people. Heyman explained why it mattered. But behind the promos and suplexes, something deeper was happening. Heyman used Brock to make himself indispensable. He wasn't just an advocate. He was the translator. The puppet master. And when Lesnar disappeared between pay-per-views, Heyman stayed. Present. Vocal. Relevant. Even when Brock lost, Heyman never did. And when Brock's story began to fade, Heyman pivoted again. To the next apex predator. Roman Reigns wasn't always beloved. His babyface run was rocky, forced, and met with boos instead of cheers. But when he returned in 2020 with a new attitude, darker, colder, and more confident, Paul Heyman saw it before anyone else did. Roman wasn't just ready. He was ripe. Heyman attached himself at exactly the right moment, just as Roman turned heel, just as he needed credibility, just as WWE needed a new pillar to build around. It was a masterstroke. Heyman got creative input, camera time, and front-row access to the Bloodline storyline, arguably the greatest long-term narrative WWE has produced in a decade. But for Heyman, it wasn't about the story. It was about staying at the center of the power map. There's a pattern to Heyman's betrayals. He doesn't yell. He doesn't lash out. He doesn't explode. He withdraws. He pauses mid-promo. He deflects questions. He looks away during conflicts. This is how he moves. Quietly. Surgically. Preparing his next move long before you even realize he's already made it. In the months leading up to his turn on Roman, he began to shrink. Shorter promos. Less input. Nervous energy. Glances that lingered too long. Fans thought it was part of the story. It was, but not the one WWE was telling on camera. It was the one Heyman was writing off it. One common thread through every Paul Heyman alliance? He never chooses the finished product. He picks the project. He likes to mold champions. Influence them. Turn them into monsters and masterminds. That's why, once someone no longer needs him, the clock starts ticking. Brock stopped needing him. Roman stopped listening. Seth Rollins? Still evolving. Still open to chaos. Still burning things down and rebuilding them differently. And that's why Heyman walked away from a throne. To help build a new one. Behind every decision Heyman makes is a war map. Not a spreadsheet. He thinks in battles. Territory. Psychological warfare. He uses allies like weapons. And when they dull, he swaps them for sharper tools. So no, this wasn't a betrayal. It was a power transfer. And as we'll see in the next section, the real reason he chose Seth Rollins is because Seth isn't just chaos. He's chaos Heyman can control. At least for now. This section digs into what fans didn't see coming, or more accurately, what they ignored. The signs of a fracture within the bloodline were there all along, both on screen and behind the curtain. This isn't just a story of a betrayal. It's a breakdown of trust, power, and control, long before Heyman walked away. You don't implode at the top. You rot from the inside. Anonymous WWE producer, off record, early 2024, the bloodline was never supposed to last forever. Nothing in WWE does. But fans bought into the illusion because it felt so tight. So well written. So emotionally layered. Roman Reigns at the helm. Paul Heyman in the corner. The Usos, his brothers. Solo Sikoa. The silent enforcer. But dominance creates paranoia. And paranoia kills loyalty. What started as unity quietly twisted into something else: fear, resentment, and unspoken tension. Not all at once. Not loudly. But consistently, in the background, like a hum behind the promo. And if you were really watching, the signs were everywhere. Roman Reigns called himself the head of the table. He demanded acknowledgement, not collaboration. The bloodline wasn't a faction. It was a dictatorship. And for a while, that worked. Jey Uso submitted. Jimmy followed. Solo stepped in line. Heyman managed the machine. Every episode, every segment reinforced one idea: Roman is the center. The gravity. The god. But here's the truth no one said out loud: you can't lead people who are only with you out of fear. Because fear fades. And when it does, people start remembering who they were before they knelt. Jey was never fully loyal. His entire arc was built on conflict. Torn between family obligation and personal pride. He didn't just acknowledge Roman. He resented him. He played the role because the alternative was exile. Look at their matches. Their conversations. The tears. Jey wasn't brainwashed, he was surviving. And Heyman? He saw that. He used it. Watch closely, in key moments, Heyman would glance nervously when Jey challenged Roman. He always tried to mediate. But that wasn't loyalty, it was damage control. Because deep down, he knew Jey was one spark away from blowing the whole thing apart. Jimmy never bought the tribal chief narrative the way Jey did. He had his own vibe, cocky, loud, resistant. While Jey cried and submitted, Jimmy smirked and stalled. His promos had edge. His body language was different. He always walked half a step behind Roman, but never fully in line. And when the cracks began showing on camera, Heyman shifted. He stopped making eye contact with Jimmy. He stuttered more in backstage interviews. It was subtle, but real. Paul Heyman doesn't get nervous unless the plan is slipping. And in 2023, it started slipping. Solo was supposed to be the answer, a loyal, mute force of nature who would keep the bloodline intact. Instead, he became its biggest question mark. Cold. Silent. Detached. Unlike the Usos, Solo wasn't raised beside Roman, he was sent to Roman. Like an insurance policy. But as the story progressed, Solo didn't act like muscle. He acted like an outsider. No real promos. No smiles. Just blind execution. And that's dangerous. Because a man with no emotion doesn't resist you, but he also doesn't care about you. Heyman started watching Solo differently in late 2023. Not as a protector. But as a threat. The bloodline barely survived Survivor Series. Outside the ring, creative directions were changing. Fan fatigue was setting in. The formula, interference, low blow, title defense, was becoming stale. Internally, reports began leaking. Roman was less involved week to week. The Usos wanted space for Solo runs. Solo Sikoa was gaining attention from top brass as a breakout star. Paul Heyman? Barely on scripts anymore. This wasn't just a slow burn. It was decay. And the moment Heyman saw the audience turning on the story, he knew his clock was running out. He's always been ahead of the downfall. That's how he survives it. In 2021 and 2022, Heyman was Roman's heartbeat. He delivered key promos. Ran interference. Booked backstage meetings. You couldn't separate the tribal chief from the Wiseman. But by 2023? His lines got shorter. His presence less meaningful. Sometimes he was there just to hold the belts. Sometimes he didn't speak at all. Roman's promos became longer. His dominance complete. And Heyman? Just a background character in a story he once wrote. That's when he started preparing the next chapter, not publicly, not loudly, but deliberately. When Paul Heyman gets quiet, he's planning his exit. Multiple behind-the-scenes reports support this trajectory. In December 2023, a locker room source told Fightful, Heyman's been quieter than usual. He's not pitching ideas like he used to. A SmackDown writer claimed, there's tension between Reigns' team and Heyman creatively. Not bad blood, just fatigue. Even Rollins reportedly joked off camera, "If I ever get Heyman, it's game over." Little moments. Little shifts. But together, they told the real story. Heyman was becoming obsolete, and that's when he becomes most dangerous. Roman Reigns believed he was untouchable. That the dynasty he built would keep Paul Heyman loyal. But Heyman doesn't do loyalty. He does leverage. And when the bloodline stopped offering him control, stopped needing his strategy, and stopped listening to his ideas, he walked. But he didn't walk alone. He walked straight toward the one man who would never ask for his loyalty. Because Seth Rollins doesn't want control. He wants destruction. And for the first time in years, Paul Heyman found something better than order. He found freedom. You either die the hero, or live long enough to see yourself become the villain. The Dark Knight in WWE, you don't die. You evolve, or you fall. Roman Reigns was never supposed to lead like this. Not at first. When he returned in 2020, he was cold, confident, and dangerous, but not unhinged. He didn't yell. He didn't threaten his family. He didn't need to. He led by dominance, not desperation. But power changes people. Especially when it's unchecked. And as Roman's control over WWE grew, his grip on reality loosened. The tribal chief became something else, something darker. Something more insecure. He stopped being a leader. He became a tyrant. And that's where the story really turns. Let's go back to the beginning. Heyman aligned with Roman because he saw brilliance. Not just a star, a system. A force that could rule an empire with ruthless consistency. Roman's heel turn was brilliant because it wasn't emotional, it was strategic. And Heyman? He respects that. He thrives on that. The early version of the tribal chief was a master manipulator. Calm. Ice cold. Measured in every word. He let others panic while he stood still. He carried himself like a boss who didn't need to scream to prove he was in charge. He acknowledged silence. He weaponized restraint. That's the Roman Heyman invested in. But he didn't stay that way. Look at the trajectory from 2020 to 2024. The promos got longer. The ego swelled. The moments of silence were replaced with rants. The once tactical violence became theatrical cruelty. At first, Roman tested his cousins, putting them through matches to earn their place. It felt like tribal tough love. But eventually, it became something else, humiliation. He wasn't testing them anymore. He was reminding them they were beneath him. Heyman's expression during these moments said it all. Early on, he smirked. Nodded. Even whispered advice. But by 2023? He stood still. Nervous. Palms ringing. Eyes down. He wasn't leading anymore. He was waiting. Because once Roman stopped calculating, he started imploding. The scariest part of Roman's reign wasn't the violence, it was the isolation. He pushed everyone away, Jey Uso, who walked out. Jimmy Uso, who turned on him. Solo Sikoa, who became colder and harder to read. Sami Zayn, who exposed the cracks in the foundation. And Paul Heyman? He became a bystander. Then a liability. The Roman Reigns of 2020 saw Heyman as an asset. A co-architect. A mind to challenge and sharpen his own. The Roman Reigns of 2024? He saw him as furniture. And that's when Heyman knew it was over. The downfall of any ruler starts when they stop listening. Roman stopped taking advice. His promos were no longer dialogues. They became declarations. He didn't ask questions. He issued commands. Heyman would try, subtly, to interject. A hand on the shoulder. A whispered suggestion mid-segment. But Roman ignored him. He dismissed him. The same man who once whispered into Heyman's ear backstage, now waved him off like background noise. In WWE, when a manager gets talked over on live TV, that's not just character work. That's foreshadowing. Ego is a drug. And Roman was mainlining it. He began treating his title reign as divine. Not earned, ordained. His catchphrases shifted from statements to sermons. His walk to the ring got slower. His voice deeper. Every move screamed one thing: I am untouchable. But Heyman knew better. No one is untouchable in WWE. Not even the tribal chief. Not when the locker room is turning. Not when the crowd is cooling. Not when the story is running out of oxygen. And most importantly, not when Seth Rollins is circling. Roman didn't just change, he changed how he ruled. Instead of inspiring fear in his opponents, he inspired it in his own circle. He gaslit Jay. Bullied Jimmy. Controlled Solo. And he intimidated Heyman, or tried to. But Heyman doesn't flinch at fear. He studies it. And once he saw Roman using fear as a weapon instead of strategy as a compass, the Wiseman made his own calculation: this king is about to fall. Heyman didn't storm out. He didn't cut a scathing promo. He didn't even get physical. He simply stopped protecting Roman. And once he stopped protecting him, the world saw what Heyman already knew: Roman was vulnerable. Not because he was weak. But because he was alone. And in WWE, isolation is death. By the time Heyman turned on Roman, it wasn't a shock to those paying attention. The bloodline was no longer an empire. It was a waiting room. Waiting for another defection. Waiting for another rebellion. Waiting for collapse. Roman lost more than his advocate. He lost the mirror that kept him grounded. And when you shatter the mirror, you can't recognize yourself anymore. He didn't hit him. He didn't yell. He didn't even look angry. He just left. Fan comment: YouTube. WWE's most powerful moments don't always happen with a steel chair or a swerve out of nowhere. Sometimes, it's the slow burn. The moment you think will go one way, but your gut tells you it's slipping. That's what made this betrayal so devastating. It wasn't loud. It was cold. The arena was electric. Not because people expected drama, but because this felt like just another statement segment. Roman Reigns in his prime. Solo Sikoa by his side. The tribal chief standing tall with gold on his shoulder and Paul Heyman holding the titles like holy artifacts. There was no tension, yet. Roman paced. Calm, controlled. Microphone in hand. He talked about dominance. Legacy. Loyalty. He turned toward Heyman, gesturing to him like a proud father about to let the Wiseman speak. And that's when it started to shift. Heyman didn't reach for the mic. He didn't raise his hand. He didn't smile. He hesitated. It was a flicker, half a second. But in wrestling, a half-second hesitation is louder than a super kick. Roman noticed it. He paused mid-sentence. Solo glanced sideways, confused. And in that instant, the camera zoomed in on Heyman's face. Not anger. Not fear. Regret. And then, the arena exploded. Seth Rollins' music hit, loud, chaotic, and unexpected. The crowd lost it. Not because he was a threat, but because he wasn't supposed to be there. He wasn't even part of this feud. He wasn't scheduled. He wasn't meant to exist in this moment. But there he was. Smirking. Wearing one of those absurd jackets only Seth Rollins can wear. Laughing, walking slow, taunting the tribal chief with every step. Roman's face went stone cold. But Heyman? Didn't flinch. That was the second clue. As Seth made his way to the ring, Roman turned to Heyman. You knew he was coming? It wasn't scripted. It felt too raw. Too real. Heyman didn't answer. Roman pressed, "Did you bring him here?" Still nothing. No eye contact. No stuttering. No panic. Heyman just looked forward, at Rollins. And smiled. In that moment, the energy in the arena flipped. The crowd started connecting the dots. Why wasn't Heyman stepping in front of Roman like usual? Why wasn't he playing mediator? Why was he stepping back? That's when the fans started to buzz. A different kind of buzz. Not hype. Panic. Rollins circled the ring. He wasn't attacking. He wasn't charging. He was watching. Waiting. Heyman took one step toward him. Roman barked, "Where are you going?" Heyman didn't answer. He stepped out of the ring. And walked over to Seth Rollins. No mic. No promo. No betrayal monologue. Just a handshake. Rollins reached out. Heyman took it. And in that second, the entire bloodline narrative crumbled. Roman stood frozen. Solo looked stunned. The camera caught Heyman's expression, not gloating, not smug, but satisfied. Like a man who had finally realigned the universe to his liking. Heyman didn't run up the ramp. He walked, slowly, beside Seth Rollins. They didn't turn back. Roman stood in the ring, jaw clenched, fist shaking. Solo Sikoa moved slightly in front of him, like he wasn't sure whether to protect his cousin, or leave with Heyman. The commentary was near silent. Only one sentence mattered. Paul Heyman has walked away from Roman Reigns. It wasn't the shock. It was the inevitability. Fans weren't just reacting to what happened. They were remembering every sign they missed, the way Heyman had started praising Rollins in offhand comments. The way he'd stopped defending Roman's actions. The way he looked at Solo lately, like he didn't trust him. This wasn't sudden. It was earned. For the first time in years, Roman Reigns looked vulnerable. No belts in his hand. No family flanking him. No Wiseman whispering in his ear. Just silence. Just realization. Just the weight of power slipping through his fingers. And in that silence, something ended. Not just a partnership. A dynasty. Every great betrayal leaves breadcrumbs. But the best betrayals? They leave the truth in plain sight, so subtle, so buried under chaos, that no one sees it until it's too late. This section uncovers the details, the moments, the signs that Paul Heyman's betrayal wasn't spontaneous, it was scripted by him all along. Looking back, I should have seen it. But that's how Heyman works. He hides the knife behind a smile. Former WWE creative team member, off record we were all so focused on Roman. His dominance. His promos. His slow transformation into a tyrant. We forgot to watch Paul Heyman. And that was the mistake. Because Heyman didn't just turn on Roman Reigns. He planned it. Carefully. Quietly. Long before Seth Rollins ever showed up. Long before the crowd began to cool. Long before Roman noticed anything was wrong. This section is about the signs we ignored, and the brilliance of a man who's always playing 4D chess when everyone else is watching Raw in 2D. In early 2023, Paul Heyman's promos started getting shorter. Not because he ran out of things to say, but because he was pulling back. Look at the progression. In 2021, Heyman would speak for several uninterrupted minutes. He guided the audience, built tension, closed every promo strong. In 2023, he became hesitant. Pauses. Nervous glances. Lines like, "That's something only the tribal chief can decide," that wasn't just character development. It was distance. Heyman was slowly removing himself from the inner circle, publicly. And no one noticed. A fan-favorite podcast moment from late 2023 flew under the radar at the time. Heyman, appearing in character on a backstage digital segment, was asked which superstar impressed him most that year. He didn't say Roman. He didn't say Solo. He said, Seth Rollins, there's a man who refuses to be defined by anything but evolution. It seemed harmless. Praiseworthy, even. But that's how Heyman speaks when he's laying groundwork. He doesn't shout the future. He whispers it into your subconscious. Production nerds noticed something unusual around the November-December 2023 stretch. Heyman stopped standing beside Roman during certain entrances. He started trailing behind. Sometimes, slightly behind Solo Sikoa, symbolically and physically less aligned with Roman. In backstage segments, he wasn't centered. He was off to the side. Sometimes completely silent. This wasn't an accident. In WWE, camera placement is storytelling. And Heyman knew exactly what story he was telling. I'm already halfway out the door. Watch every major bloodline promo from late 2023 on. Start counting how many times Heyman side-eyes Solo Sikoa. It's not fear. It's evaluation. Solo represented Roman's growing paranoia, a silent enforcer who did what he was told without asking questions. But Heyman doesn't trust silence. He analyzes it. And the more Solo obeyed Roman without flinching, the more Heyman realized the bloodline was shifting from strategy to obedience. That's when he started to check out. Because blind loyalty doesn't need a Wiseman. When Roman attacked Sami Zayn? Heyman was nowhere near the segment. When the Usos turned on each other? Heyman was shown reacting from backstage, not ringside. And during Roman's final major title defense of 2023? Heyman was in the corner, but he didn't move. He didn't cheer. He didn't even flinch when Roman took a finisher. The announcers didn't mention it. But longtime fans noticed. That wasn't a manager. That was a man watching someone he was done protecting. In a rare post-show WWE digital interview, Heyman was asked what's next for the bloodline. He paused. Looked off camera. Then said, what's next, is survival. That line didn't get much traction at the time. But now? It's a thesis. Because Paul Heyman doesn't follow tribes. He survives them. And that was the moment he told us, without telling us, that the bloodline's days were numbered. Go back to the week before the betrayal. Roman's in the ring. Seth Rollins' name comes up in a passing insult. A throwaway line meant to draw heat. Heyman, just behind Roman, smirks. Not a full laugh. Not a sneer. Just a twitch. A single lip corner raised. At the time, fans thought it was a live mistake. A camera cut too slow. A botch. It wasn't. That was the tell. The same tell Heyman gave when Brock Lesnar returned in 2012. The same smirk when he whispered, my client ended the streak. It's not a reaction. It's a reveal. Because Paul Heyman doesn't operate on the volume of the story. He operates in the margins. While we were watching Roman's monologues, Heyman was watching everyone else. While we were focused on Solo's loyalty, Heyman was planning around it. While we waited for a chair shot, a turn, a double cross, Heyman just walked away. And that's the beauty of it. There's a reason Heyman's betrayal felt so devastating, because deep down, it wasn't shocking. It was familiar. We've seen it before. When he turned on CM Punk. When he aligned with Big Show, then betrayed him. When he returned to Brock, after begging Roman to trust him. This is who Paul Heyman is. He doesn't explode. He evaporates. And when he comes back? It's always with the man who burns hotter than the last. Now that we've seen how Paul Heyman walked away from Roman Reigns and into Seth Rollins' corner, this section asks the one question that matters most, why? Was it about survival? A strategic pivot to stay relevant? Or was there something deeper? Something personal? What if this wasn't just a business decision, but a very long, very cold act of revenge? Paul Heyman doesn't forget who disrespects him. He just waits until it costs you everything. Wrestling Journalist, 2024. This wasn't just a betrayal. It was a message. And if you think Heyman turned on Roman Reigns simply because Seth Rollins was hot with the crowd, or because the bloodline storyline had run its course, you're missing the point. This wasn't about the next move. It was about the last insult. There's one moment, one often overlooked moment, that might be the root of everything. December 2021. Roman Reigns publicly fired Paul Heyman in the middle of the ring. Called him a snake. Humiliated him. And then, he Superman punched him in the face. It was framed as a temporary split. A storyline wrinkle before Brock Lesnar returned. But watch that segment again. Not the punch. The face. Heyman wasn't selling a turn. He was genuinely stunned. Hurt. Shattered. The tribal chief had insulted his intelligence, the one thing Paul Heyman holds above all else. And even though they reconciled weeks later, something changed. Not in the story. In Heyman. There's a pattern to Paul Heyman's behavior. When he's disrespected, he doesn't lash out. He doesn't scream. He waits. He doesn't want revenge in the moment. He wants perfect revenge. Public. Inevitable. The kind of move that doesn't just win the game. It ends the game. That moment in 2021 planted the seed. Roman had embarrassed him in front of the world. Used him as bait in his feud with Brock. Treated him like a pawn. So Heyman did what he always does. He started planning his checkmate. In truth? It's likely both. Heyman saw Roman losing control. Losing touch. Becoming everything he once vowed not to be. But he didn't try to save him. He chose to replace him. And that's not redemption. That's retribution. For 2 years, Heyman became defined by one role, the Wiseman. Not the architect. Not the strategist. The servant. He held belts. Bowed in backstage segments. Delivered titles to the tribal chief like a butler. It was all part of the story, until it wasn't. Because the more Roman demanded acknowledgement, the less he acknowledged Heyman. And that, more than anything else, was the deal-breaker. Heyman doesn't need to be loved. But he needs to be respected. And when that stopped, so did his loyalty. Seth Rollins wasn't just the best performer available. He was the perfect revenge. Think about it, the only man to pin Roman clean in the Shield. The man who never feared Roman, even mocked him. The man who represents everything Roman can't control. By aligning with Rollins, Heyman didn't just find a new project. He found a weapon. One designed specifically to destroy Roman's psychology, not just his championship. Because when you've built a legacy on fear, the one thing you can't fight is a man who laughs in your face. Was this always the plan? Maybe not from day one. But from the moment Roman crossed the line, publicly, physically, and repeatedly, Heyman began mapping the exit. It took months. Maybe a year. But this is what Heyman does. He doesn't survive. He outlasts. And when the time is right, he detonates. The brilliance of Heyman's betrayal is that it's disguised as strategy. Fans say he left Roman because Seth is red hot. Analysts say it was time to pivot away from the bloodline story. Commentators say this is just Heyman being smart. But that's the trick. Heyman made revenge look like management. He made payback look like progress. So Roman couldn't see it coming. And when it hit, it didn't just shake his faction. It shattered his identity. Here's the twist, Paul Heyman doesn't believe in good guys or bad guys. He believes in balance. He believes the wrestling world needs chaos and order. Revolution and rules. And when one side tips too far, he tips it back. Roman had become a dictator. Seth? A disruptor. Heyman chose the disruptor. Not just to win, but to restore equilibrium. Even if it meant burning down the empire he helped build. In the end, Paul Heyman's true motive is simple: he survives by making others destroy each other. He never throws the first punch. He just moves the pieces. And when they collapse, he's already working with the winner. Now that we've unpacked Heyman's motive, it's time to examine the mechanics. This section analyzes how the move to Seth Rollins wasn't just emotional, it was masterful. A chess-level decision with layered outcomes. Paul Heyman didn't just betray Roman. He restructured the balance of WWE power. Let's break down the genius of the play. Heyman didn't just jump ship. He sank one, and captained the other mid-storm. Analyst quote, Wrestling Pulse, March 2025. There's betrayal. Then there's brilliance. Paul Heyman's pivot wasn't just about leaving the bloodline, it was about redefining who holds the map to WWE's future. On paper, it looked like he simply left a fading star for a rising one. But if you look closer, you'll see it wasn't just a turn. It was a strategy shift. And like all Heyman decisions, it wasn't made at the moment. It was calculated 20 moves ahead. Every great strategist knows, strike not when you're ready, strike when your enemy is weakest. Roman's grip was already slipping, the Usos were gone. Solo was unpredictable. The audience? Fatigued. Meanwhile, Rollins had rebuilt himself from the ground up. No faction, no family. Just fire. His title matches were must-see. His promos were unpredictable. His crowd reactions? Explosive. Heyman didn't just find a new client. He found a contrast to everything Roman had become. Roman had grown stale. Seth was alive. The genius isn't just that Heyman left Roman. It's how he did it. No betrayal beatdown. No pipe bomb promo. No forced drama. Just a handshake with Seth. That's all it took. Roman wasn't physically harmed. He wasn't screwed out of a match. He didn't even lose a title that night. But emotionally? He was wrecked. Because Heyman didn't just walk away. He walked toward the one man Roman never fully broke, Seth Rollins. To Roman, that wasn't just a betrayal. It was treason. Inside WWE, Heyman's move sent a different message, one even louder than what fans saw. It told the entire locker room, no one is too big to be replaced. Heyman had been with Roman for years. Through storylines, title runs, backstage politics. And in one move, he reminded every wrestler watching, if the top guy gets comfortable. If the top guy stops evolving. If the top guy forgets the value of alliance. He can be replaced. That statement alone shifted momentum, in character and in real life. Most managers cut a promo to flip the audience. Heyman didn't need one. By aligning with Rollins, he weaponized crowd energy itself. Rollins was already hot, red hot. And Heyman knew that by simply stepping into that fire, the heat would melt away any ambiguity. He didn't need to explain it. The fans cheered it into existence. They turned the page for him. They justified the betrayal. They wrote the next chapter. Because Heyman doesn't chase momentum. He harnesses it. In business terms? This was a hostile takeover. And Roman? He never saw the boardroom shift happening. The most dangerous part of this new partnership isn't Rollins' unpredictability. It's Heyman's predictability. Because once Rollins takes the wheel, chaos follows. But with Heyman? That chaos gets direction. Focus. The result? Wild energy meets cold planning. Emotion meets execution. Charisma meets calculation. Heyman doesn't calm Rollins down. He aims him. Like a sniper guiding a wildfire. Here's what makes the move even more brilliant. Heyman didn't just betray Roman. He made Seth look like the hero. Think about it, Rollins didn't ask for Heyman. He didn't cheat anyone. He accepted the partnership like a man accepting a mission. The crowd read that as earned. As deserved. So Heyman came off not as a snake, but as a man finally backing the right side. That subtle shift made Roman look more villainous by comparison, and elevated Seth without having him turn face. That's storytelling judo. And here's the final layer of brilliance: Heyman didn't burn every bridge. He just crossed one. If things go sideways with Rollins, he'll pivot again. That's the beauty of how he moved: no scorched earth. No unnecessary drama. Just enough ambiguity to leave a door cracked open. That's what makes Paul Heyman unstoppable. Not loyalty. Not strength. Now we turn the camera away from the ring and onto the crowd, and the internet. This section dives into how fans responded to the betrayal, how the wrestling world reacted in real time, and how Paul Heyman's move sparked a ripple effect of speculation, emotion, and chaos across the WWE universe. I screamed. I've been watching wrestling for 20 years and I still didn't see that coming. And now I don't trust anyone in this company anymore. Reddit user, r/squared circle. When Paul Heyman turned on Roman Reigns, it didn't just shake one faction. It shook everyone watching. Because fans, even the cynical, seasoned ones, believed Heyman and Reigns were untouchable. Unbreakable. WWE had conditioned us to think this bond was permanent. And then it cracked. No warning. No leaks. Just a moment. A silence. A handshake. And with that, years of loyalty vanished, and years of speculation began. Let's start with the building that night. As soon as Heyman took that step away from Roman and moved towards Seth Rollins, the crowd stopped chanting. Stopped booing. Stopped anything. For a solid 4 seconds, it was dead quiet, the kind of silence that only comes from genuine disbelief. And then? Explosion. The fans didn't cheer the betrayal. They cheered the twist. Because WWE had done something rare, they surprised people. Organically. Believably. Emotionally. Twitter, now X, Reddit, Instagram, YouTube, every platform lit up within seconds. Memes flooded timelines. Replays were clipped, slowed down, captioned. Fan theories started within minutes. Here's a sample of what trended in the first hour. #Heyman turned #TribleTrader #Rollins Alliance. He shook his hand, used sarcastically, repeatedly. Some fans praised the story. Others were in denial. Many were screaming for a Heyman promo to explain it all. But one thing united everyone: nobody could stop talking about it. In the hours that followed, r/squared circle and wrestling Discord servers turned into war rooms. Fans rewatched months of promos, interviews, and background moments. They created clip montages of Heyman's changing posture. They started asking questions like, did Seth and Heyman plan this months ago? Was Heyman feeding Roman bad advice to weaken him before the turn? Is this part of a bigger revenge plot involving Cody or even Brock? Some threads ran 500+ comments deep. It wasn't just content. It was detective work. And that's how you know a story landed. Wrestling journalists and podcasters responded with a rare mix of awe and urgency. Dave Meltzer called it the cleanest executed betrayal since Rollins broke up the Shield. Sean Ross Sapp tweeted, did not have Heyman flipping on Roman in Q1 on my 2025 bingo card. Podcasters were split, some called it brilliant long-term storytelling. Others worried it meant WWE was rushing the end of the bloodline era. A few floated wild theories, like this being the setup for a triple turn involving Cody, Seth, and Heyman. Not impossible, if we're being honest. But everyone agreed. It was a game changer. Something strange happened post-betrayal. The fanbase split, not over whether the turn was good or bad, but over sides. On one side, the tribalists. Die-hard Roman fans who saw this as the ultimate act of disloyalty. Heyman used Roman to stay relevant. That's betrayal, period. On the other side, the visionaries. Seth Rollins loyalists who believed the move was overdue. Heyman chose the future. Roman got lazy. He earned this. The feud moved beyond kayfabe. It became personal for fans. Which means WWE didn't just shift its main event scene. It ignited a cultural divide. Within 24 hours, fan art of Seth and Heyman together appeared on Instagram and DeviantArt. TikTok soundtracked by eerie music cut together clips of Heyman smiling beside Rollins with captions like, "He always knew." YouTube edits called "The Fall of the Bloodline" hit 6 figures in views. Spotify playlists with names like "Blood on the Table" and "Visionary Betrayal" were curated. The betrayal didn't just change a storyline. It sparked art. That's rare. It's easy to say this was just a storyline. But it felt bigger. Why? Because it touched something deeper than shock value. It messed with trust. Fans trusted this alliance. They built emotional currency into it. Roman's transformation was tied to Heyman's guidance. Heyman's survival was tied to Roman's dominance. When that cracked, it made people reevaluate everything. And that's the sign of a powerful arc. When fans don't just react, they rethink. The speculation machine, what happens next? Even now, fans can't agree on what's coming. Will Seth betray Heyman? Will Roman try to win Heyman back? Is Solo Sikoa the new project? Is this a setup for a three-way power war at WrestleMania? Every answer creates more questions. And every question keeps people watching. Which is exactly what Paul Heyman wants. This isn't just where the story ends, it's where the meaning lands. The fallout has happened, the betrayal is complete, and Roman Reigns has been exposed. But what does it all mean? In this conclusion, we tie back to the hook, deliver a final emotional payoff, and leave viewers with the one thing great stories always give, a reason to keep watching. It was never just about loyalty. It was about who controlled the future. Closing line, Wrestling Observer Radio. Paul Heyman didn't just betray Roman Reigns. He rewrote the rules of allegiance. This wasn't a moment meant for shock value. It wasn't a quick swerve. It was a slow-burning masterpiece, carefully crafted, painfully personal, and coldly executed. We began with a simple question: why did Paul Heyman betray Roman Reigns and choose Seth Rollins? Now we know it wasn't one reason. It was every reason. Roman changed. He stopped listening. Stopped trusting. Started believing he was the story, not part of one. Heyman faded into the background. Quiet. Studying. Calculating. Waiting. Seth Rollins emerged, fiery, chaotic, unstoppable. A perfect partner in destruction. And when the time came, Heyman did what he always does. He walked out of one kingdom. And into another. Heyman doesn't move with his heart. He moves with his head. He doesn't care about tribal loyalty or family ties. He cares about narrative power. About staying in control of the most important thing in pro wrestling, momentum. And when Roman lost his grip on that momentum, Heyman left. Not in anger. Not in fear. But in control. For the first time in years, Roman isn't in control. No bloodline at his back. No titles in his hands. No Wiseman in his corner. But here's the thing, this isn't the end of Roman Reigns. This is the reset. This is the moment that could force him to evolve again, or disappear under the weight of everything he built. And that's the tension WWE will carry forward. Is the tribal chief dead? Or is something even darker about to rise? Rollins is already dangerous on his own. But with Heyman? Now he's focused. And that's terrifying. Because if Heyman truly believes in Seth the way he once believed in Brock, and Roman, and Punk, then the entire WWE main event scene just shifted into his hands. Rollins was already a visionary. Now he's a visionary with an architect behind him. This is the legacy Heyman has spent decades building. He doesn't just advise champions. He creates them, shapes them, then leaves when they forget who helped build the throne. This isn't about Roman versus Seth. This is about Heyman versus irrelevance. And once again, he's found a way to remain the most powerful man in WWE, without ever stepping into the ring. So now the question comes back to you. Was this betrayal justified? Was it strategic? Or was it a quiet, ruthless revenge? And more importantly, who's next? Because if there's one thing we've learned, Paul Heyman is always thinking ahead. And when he turns again? You'll never see it coming. If this story hit you, if you're still trying to piece it all together, drop your theory in the comments. Let us know, was this redemption or revenge? Can Roman recover? Will Seth survive Heyman's ambition? Like, share, subscribe. Because this is just the beginning. The story of Paul Heyman isn't over. It just entered its most dangerous chapter yet.